Friends, I wanted to make sure that we finish the book Noodlephant because when we come back from the break, we will be reading the sequel to Noodlephant, the brand new book, Okapi Tale by Jacob Kramer and K-Fai Steele. And I want you to have Noodlephant fresh in your brain before we read that book. Now, just to give you a reminder, while I am reading Noodlephant, I want you to be using your thinking eyes and listening to my words for a couple things. I want you to be looking for how are systems in the book unfair? And I also want you to be thinking about power. How do the kangaroos keep power? And how do the other animals get some of that power? Because we are going to be filling this chart out when we come back. How do the kangaroos keep and get power? And how do Noodlephant and her friends keep and get some of that power for themselves and their community? So, with that said, I'm going to start back at the beginning of the book and read to you one of my favorite books of all time, Noodlephant. Okay, here we go. Noodlephant by Jacob Kramer and K-Fai Steele. And as we discussed a little bit, this is the town of Rouville. Now, over here is where all the kangaroos live and where the courthouse and court square is. And if we go over the river, that's where we see Noodlephant's apartment, and this is where all the other animals live in the town, so separate from the kangaroos. Noodlephant. Once there was an elephant who loved noodles. She loved noodles so much that all her friends called her Noodlephant. She loved to scoop noodles in huge, slippery slurps and eat them by the trunk load. She had neighbors of all sorts. Some had fur, some were smooth, some could roll, and some could fly. And some had deep pockets and were very, very bossy. And those were the kangaroos. We can see one being bossy right over here. Well, the kangaroos were always making new laws. They made laws about who could swim at the beach. Only kangaroos. They made laws about who could enjoy the butterfly garden. Only kangaroos. And they made laws about who could make laws. Only kangaroos. All right, now remember, we are looking for examples of how kangaroos get power and how everybody else gets power. So on this page, I really want you to think about how are these kangaroos making themselves the most powerful people in this community? Think about it for a minute. And if you thought they're making all the laws, you're absolutely right. Making laws is a way of getting power. And look, they're making laws that give them all the good things in the world. Now, Noodlephant and her friends knew the laws weren't fair, but they didn't want to get thrown in the zoo. So instead of swimming at the beach, they cooled off in the sprinkler. And look who the sprinkler is. And instead of visiting the butterfly garden, they watched moths dance in the lamplight. And instead of making laws, they made food for each other. Right, so I want you to be thinking about how are Noodlephant and her friends getting some of their power back? If you said making food for each other and building community, you are correct. Now, Noodlephant in particular was famous for her pasta parties. She loved to mix whole bags of semolina flour with dozens of eggs, delighting her guests with noodles of all shapes and sizes. Look at the diverse community here. We have rhino and fish and duck all getting down on some of those noodles. And for super special occasions, she would go out in the forest and forage some mushrooms for her grandmother's secret pasta sauce. And here she is, sniffing out those special mushrooms with her trunk. Well, one day, while Noodlephant was shopping for the party, a kangaroo blew his whistle. You there, elephant! What are you doing with all those eggs and semolina flour? Said Noodlephant, trying to stay calm. I was thinking of making a fresh batch of fettuccine, or maybe some curly cavatappi would be nice, or maybe I could stretch a tangle of tagliatelle. Oh, no, you won't, snapped the kangaroo, pulling a law book from his pouch. Elephants are no longer allowed to eat noodles. It says right here, noodles are for kangaroos. Elephants shall only eat sticks and branches. Well, maybe you don't know me, said Noodlephant, but I'm Noodlephant. I'm all about noodles. You're an elephant, said the kangaroo. Oof. And if we catch you eating noodles, we'll lock you in the zoo. Buy some acacia branches and don't even think about noodles. Now, friends, look at this page. The eggs and semolina flour are all over the ground. There is a pretty clear way that these kangaroos are staying in power. Oh, and walking home, Noodlephant couldn't help but think about noodles. She thought about their shapes and colors. She thought about all their slurpy, delicious sauces. And when her friends arrived, Noodlephant had nothing to offer them. She tried pouring tomato sauce on the acacia branches, but they were not slippery. They were not slurpable, and the thorns prickled and poked the inside of their bellies. Noodlephant gazed at her tender belly button. Its shape reminded her of something. A tortellino! It's one of those pastas that's a little ring with cheese inside. All right, there's going to be a big change here. Look, all at once, snap, she had an idea. A fantastic idea. A revolutionary idea for a completely new kind of machine. Together, Noodlephant and her friends tapped and tinkered, singing as they worked. Those kangaroos are kangarooed, making rules about our food, telling us how we should think, what we can eat, and what to drink. When our new machine is done, we'll eat pasta by the ton, 'cause noodles are for me's and you's, not just bossy kangaroos. It was a very catchy song, yes. They called their new machine the Fantastic Noodler. It was very complicated, but also very simple. With a few turns of the crank, it could turn anything into noodles. Look, Noodlephant tossed in some pens and turned the crank, and out tumbled a pile of overcooked penne. Too soggy! She knocked a dent in the side of the machine, and the next batch was perfectly al dente. They looked around the house to find some more stuff to transform. They craked cans into cannelloni, pillows into ravioli, and radiators into radiatori. Yes, they were cranking out all kinds of noodles. They were slippery, they were slurpy, they were scrumptious. It was a grand pasta party, the best one yet. That is, until... Come out with your trunk up! Uh-oh. The kangaroos. They were looking through the window. They saw all this. And now Noodlephant, she's been caught breaking the law. And so she goes to kangaroo court. The kangaroos tried Noodlephant in kangaroo court. They said that she had broken the laws, but Noodlephant said that the laws were already broken. And notice who's the judge and who are the members of the jury and who maybe some of the lawyers are here. It looks like all kangaroos sitting in judgment of Noodlephant. And she declared, "The laws for elephants and shrews, tortoises, fruit bats, and gnus should be the same laws as those we use for all you wealthy kangaroos." "Guilty," said the judge. And as she was being led away, Noodlephant shouted, "Justice is for all of us, not just for the bossiest. And though right now it sounds absurd, one day you'll want to eat your words." Well, each day the zookeeper brought Noodlephant a thorny pile of acacia branches, and each day she refused to eat them. She was on strike. Weeks passed, and Noodlephant got thinner and thinner. She's looking quite thin for an elephant there. And when her friends visited, they worried about her health. They urged her to eat, but she was resolute. "The kangaroo laws aren't fair," she said. "Everyone knows it. I'll starve before I eat a single thorn." Well, Noodlephant's friends called up the kangaroos and wrote them letters. They protested outside the courthouse. Some kangaroos agreed the laws were wrong, but most of them didn't care. Look closely at this page right here, friends. There is an example of how Noodlephant's friends are doing something powerful to help her situation. But Noodlephant remained alone and stuck in the zoo. Her friends agreed that they had to do something. One lonesome day, Noodlephant received a letter. "Dear Noodlephant, we know you don't like acacia branches, but we wish you would try them tonight. Deep down, you might just find they're fantastic. Love, your friends." Well, that evening, Noodlephant accepted the zookeeper's pile of thorny branches. And she dug deep down with her trunk, and she found the fantastic noodler. For an appetizer, she cranked the letter into the machine, and out came a steaming bowl of alphabet soup because the letter had words in it. And look, it made little noodle letters. Then Noodlephant clamped the machine to the bars of her cage, and quietly and slowly she turned the crank. The iron bars collapsed into a warm pile of udon noodles, which she scooped up in huge slippery slurps. She had never been so happy to see all her friends. All right, now what happens here is very, very interesting because she's just broken out of the zoo, and look what they decide to do. They decided to throw a pasta party, the likes of which had never been seen. Wait a minute, friends. Noodlephant just was thrown in the zoo for having a pasta party. And the first thing she's going to do when she gets out is have another one? Think about why she might do that. Noodlephant's friends spread the word. Everyone was welcome, just so long as they brought something to share. So she's not alone here. Everybody is invited in their community to this pasta party. And as for Noodlephant, she knew that the time had come to make something truly special. She ventured deep into the forest to snuffle out some wild mushrooms for, you guessed it, her grandmother's secret sauce. And these look like chanterelle mushrooms, which are the most delicious kind, in my opinion. Now, as the sun rose over the courthouse square, the animals began to cook. Smells wafted over the town, sizzling onions mixing with simmering tomatoes, the tang of raw garlic blended with fresh basil and Parmesan cheese. Oh, it's drifting in everyone's windows as they're sleeping. Well, the guests soon began to arrive. Each animal brought something different to crank through the fantastic noodler. Together, they turned corkscrews into cavatappi. They turned flowers into fiore. They turned wheels into rotelle. That is, until... What do you think you're all doing here? This is very interesting because this is something we knew was going to happen, right? And were they having this pasta party somewhere secret, like in somebody's house? No, friends, they were having it right on the courthouse lawn where everyone could see. And now the kangaroos are here. Welcome to our potluck, said Noodlephant. Our guests have all brought something to share. Do you have anything to offer? The kangaroo brandished his law book and began. The law is the law, and it says right here that noodles are for kanga. Noodlephant snatched the law book out of the kangaroo's hand. Oh, what a thoughtful contribution, said Noodlephant. And with a flick of her trunk, she whisked the law book from the kangaroo's paw and cranked it through the noodler machine. There it goes. And out came a piping hot slice of lasagna covered in bubbling cheese. She topped it off with some mushroom sauce and gave it to the kangaroo. Oh, let's find out what happens. He took a bite, and friends, look at this face. It was the most delicious thing that he had ever tasted in his entire life. The other kangaroos lined up to crank their own laws through the fantastic noodler, turning out tray after tray of mushroom lasagna. It feels like some changes are happening with these kangaroos, right? It feels like maybe they're willing to join this community and be less bossy. The town celebrated long into the night, singing together. When the laws are so unjust, misbehavior is a must. Together we will make new rules to share along with fresh noodles, 'cause noodles are for me's and you's. We won't be locked up in the zoos. We'll slurp them down on avenues, at the beach or in canoes. Yes, noodles are for me's and you's. We'll even share with kangaroos. Look, you can see that some of the kangaroos have joined them here at the table. Look, I think that's even the judge from earlier that looks like they've brought something. All right, friends, I hope you enjoyed this trip to Rouville, which is now called, you can't quite see it here, Beeston. So not just named after kangaroos anymore, Beeston, which reflects the diversity of all the animals there. Next class, we'll be going back to Beeston and finding out what happened and what really changed in this community. Are the kangaroos still being super bossy? Maybe things are more fair now. And we're going to find out what happened to that powerful machine, the fantastic noodler. All right, friends, I will see you soon. Have a great break.